Welcome to the Friends, Flings, and Relationship Things podcast, a podcast hosted by Relevant Church where we have candid discussion on all things relationships. I'm Ashley, and today on the podcast, we will be joined by our pastors Carl and Julie Nichols as we discuss week 1 of our new series. So we're joined with our pastors Carl and Julie Nichols. This past Sunday, we started a brand new series called Friends, Flings, and Relationship Things. Carl, you had some fun this past Sunday. Am I right?
Yes, I did. I always love these series. Apparently, Sunday might have been a little over the top for some people.
I got 2 texts Sunday saying, is he okay? How many coffees did he have?
Yeah, that was the theme. It seemed like the theme for the day was how many coffees have you had? But honestly, these series are just always so much fun. People laugh, and the real life stories of people's relationships and marriage. To me, it's something we all deal with, and trying to make light of those things before we get so serious is always a good time. And of course, we talked about 80s music. So
yes, and you sing some 80s songs.
If you call that singing.
Yeah, that's true. So tell me, what is your favorite 80s song?
Wow, there's a lot of 80s songs in the theme of love songs or in the theme of regular just 80s music.
Let's go love for the sake of the series.
So when I was a kid, I was telling Julie, I guess when I first, second, third, fourth grade, whatever it is, the Footloose theme song, one of those, I don't know if it's a theme song, but Almost Paradise. And I just knew that was going to be in our wedding. And then when I told her,
Julie, how do you feel about that?
I told him no.
So I told her, we're getting married, we got to do the song. And she was like, gag reflexes.
Yeah.
So Julie, what's your favorite 80s love song?
So I love anything Bon Jovi. They are my favorite. So anything that they sing would definitely be at the top of my list.
Is that what you and Mark Einerson bond over?
Yes, most definitely.
She told me the other day that if she was to ever marry somebody other than me, it would have been Bon Jovi. So I don't know how to take that.
Yeah, I think it'd be cool because my name would be Julie Bon Jovi. I just think that sounds really cool.
What's wrong with Nichols?
And it just doesn't have the same ring. But I do love Carl, for sure. Yes. But I have some respect for John Bon Jovi. He's married to his high school sweetheart. They live in their hometown. And I just think that's pretty cool.
Very similar to y'all's story a little bit, right? So,
for the most part.
You're about to celebrate your 20th anniversary, right?
Yep, in 3 months.
May.
That's so exciting.
Yes.
That's incredible. 20 years of marriage. And as somebody who gets to sit under you guys, it's really cool to watch you and see how you live your married life with your kids and everything. A little weird, but it's so much fun. So tell me, how did you start dating?
So she chased me down. No, totally kidding.
Untrue.
I feel like that's not true.
Lies.
I think we'll talk a little bit more about this later in the podcast, but one of the things that was so interesting is we really were friends first, and it was kind of a weird dynamic of how we met. I was in 7th grade. We first started kind of becoming friends, and the bond was around the fact that her sister, who's 7 years older, was going to be my 8th grade teacher, which is kind of odd and kind of weird. And now her sister works on our staff, and it's just all
that's crazy.
An interesting conversation. So we became friends over several years, and we'll talk more about how that played itself out later. But it was really a 2 or 3 year friendship before anything ever kind of come from it.
Okay, that's his side. Let me hear your side.
Yeah, about the same. I mean, it was just kind of an interesting thing that my sister was going to be his teacher and was his teacher for 8th grade math. But really, we met at church, and that's where we started hanging out. Our circle of friends was the same at church, and we did a lot of outings and just fun activities with our youth group. And so that's kind of how we started a friendship and then ultimately ended up dating.
I did used to bring my girlfriends to church and sit by Julie, which is kind of weird. She would.
That is true.
I do remember.
Which is weird.
Yes.
Which one of the things I think is interesting about that is that I'm not a proponent of dating when you're I was dating way too young, and but at the end of the day, I would bring girls to church and sit by her, and she would be. You can't do that, but I was like, you're my friend. And I thought that was interesting. There was nothing romantic about it. It was just, she was my friend at the time.
I actually moved my stuff one time because he would come and sit his stuff next to me, and he had his girlfriend at church. And so one time I was like, this is so awkward. I am not going to be that person.
I'm not sitting next to you.
And so I moved my stuff to go sit somewhere else. And then at the end of really in the middle of it, I look over and he's right there. He's like sitting next to, he had moved his stuff again. And so it was just odd. I'm not sure his girlfriend was really appreciative of that.
Yeah, probably not. I don't know if I would be very appreciative.
She's probably watching. No, I'm just kidding.
Doubt it.
Yeah. No. So you shared with us how you started dating, and since you've been together, well, you've been married for almost 20 years. How long did you date?
We dated for 6 years.
Yeah.
So technically 26 years.
Yep.
So 26 years of lots of memories and fun. So we have to hear one of your funniest dating stories.
I'm going to let Carl share that.
Okay, I'm ready. We're ready.
You know, you asked us to be prepared to share this, and I didn't really have anything but Julie reminded me of a specific story. This is actually embarrassing. It's really embarrassing for me. I don't know. We've been dating.
I'm ready. We're ready.
We've been dating probably a year or so. I was driving and I picked her up and we went on a date, went to eat. And she lived kind of outside of the city limits on some backcountry roads. And I was taking her home one night and I had a little rumble in the jungle going on. And so it just started hitting me from whatever it was that we had eaten. I don't remember what it was. And I was like, I've got to go. And there's like nowhere to go. There's no gas station. There's nothing out there. And so I remember this small little church that was, I don't know if it's a church or cult, but it was sitting on the side of, I won't tell you exactly where because I don't want you to know exactly, but it was one of those things like, it just it was like an outhouse almost in the sense of it was a bathroom, multiple bathrooms, but they were in this building and it was just dug out like an outhouse would be. So there was no way to flush. Yeah. So we pulled up in my S10 Blazer and I parked outside and locked the doors and there's no cell phones.
What were you thinking?
I couldn't do anything.
The question is, I was thinking, was she going to be there when I got back? And not because somebody took her, but because...
Did she leave?
Well, so I went in and it was... We'll spare you the details. But I came back out and, all the way to her house, it's kind of like this. And by the time we got to her house, which is like 2 miles later, I couldn't even wait 2 miles. We got to our house and I'm like, I got to go again. And so so she's knocking on the door. Mom, can you come in and, do whatever you got to do?
That wasn't the first time you met her parents, right?
No.
Okay, thank God.
No, but it was definitely one of the most awkward.
Yeah.
So
I love that so much.
Yeah.
Tell them by the time I'm just kidding.
No, that is not true. Carl always has the bathroom stories.
I love that so much. But you shared Sunday. We have this thing that we're calling the love cake at our church right now. Do you want to kind of explain?
So that was not my intention to have a love cake on stage, but apparently the layers of the illustration, you'd have to go back and watch the video, and we'll have the love cake the whole series, which is interesting.
Yeah.
The layers apparently look like a beautiful wedding cake or whatever to some people with pink and white. But the premise behind the love cake, I guess is what we'll call it. A true story, in a few weeks, we'll actually have a cake on stage as another illustration. Yeah. But the premise behind that whole thing is we'll call them layers at this point, getting the layers in order. And if you get them out of order, a lot of the times, almost every time, you're setting yourself up for failure.
Yeah.
And so specifically as it relates to that, I think when I saw that illustration by another pastor, it really made me think about why relationships are so dysfunctional and put it into a visual illustration that's like, okay, now it makes sense, because people say, of course, that's how we started our relationship. And what we talked about was how most relationships start physical or emotional. And both of those are a feeling. And the reality is 6-year-olds live on their feelings. Yeah. We never grow beyond that sometimes. And so we start this relationship, we build on a physical or emotional level. And the thing I think struck me the most from a book that we'll have available this weekend for people to purchase is that there's a 6-week to 18-month period where there's this infatuation where your brain is producing dopamine and you're living in this unsustainable state. And so the physical and the emotional is what takes over. And when you build it on that and you don't protect your emotions and obviously honor your body as the temple of God, as we would call it, as followers of Jesus, I think the hard part is when you get that out of order, everything else topples. Everything else becomes dysfunctional. So the layers are basically, and we'll talk about them and you can ask whatever questions, spiritual foundation first, then the social setting, putting yourself around those same groups of people, the right groups of people that you can find a person that you are, not necessarily the person, but a person that you're compatible with. Then you can begin, getting to know that person, the interpersonal portion of that. Then comes the emotional. Okay, this is how we protect our emotions, by making sure those other 3 layers are there first. Because if you let your emotions, too many people wear their emotions on their sleeve or give their heart away too easily. But by those first 3 layers, you protect your emotional stability. And then once you've gotten to know them and you've okay, I'm putting my heart out there. Now it's time to proceed, get counseling, do the right things, find the problem areas, let other people dig in. And I would highly suggest at least 6 months before you plan. In fact, I would suggest counseling before you get engaged, which is kind of a new way of thinking about it. And the reason is because people get engaged, they purchase all their stuff, they get their venue, they get their invitations, they make and then all of a sudden you say, wait, you're not so compatible. And not only
and then what do you do?
Yeah, and not only are you not compatible, maybe now's not the time. Maybe you need to go to counseling for a year, and you need to get help for something from your childhood, or maybe there's some major problem areas, and now all these people are coming, and you're just going to push forward anyway.
Yeah, that's
and
good.
so you protect yourself from the emotional and physical side of that by doing things in order. And when part of counseling is the interpersonal side, and getting to know the person deeper than maybe sometimes they don't even know themselves the way they think they do, or they haven't dealt with the dark sides of things. So. Then after the emotional side, then marriage, then the physical component. And if we can keep those things in alignment and protect ourselves emotionally and physically, these things have a much greater way of standing in the future.
Yeah. So hearing the order that you just shared, clearly, like, that's not the order that our culture sees it. So we'll start with you guys first. Like, was there ever a time that you got your quote unquote love cake out of order?
That sounds
It sounds weird.
So creepy, yeah. This is the Friends, Flings, relationship things series, and we're talking about love cake. I don't know. It just sounds odd. So do you want to share that, or do you want me to share that?
I think actually we did a pretty good job of keeping the love cake in order. And maybe it was, I don't know that we were as intentional about it because we were younger. We were still in high school, as we would have been had we started dating, at a later age. Because now I feel like if I were 20 and I was dating, I would do a lot of things differently than what I did when I was dating in high school. Because I will say, when you are dating at a young age, it is hard to keep your emotions really in check.
Right.
You're not emotionally mature enough to handle some of the things that a dating relationship brings. And so this is some of the stuff that we're trying to even now talk to our soon-to-be 13-year-old about, because there will come a time, in several years where he's going to want to date. And one of the things that I want to make sure is he understands the order and the boundaries that come with that. And so I think we did a pretty good job. The emotional aspect was really hard. I think from being a girl for me, I did wear my emotions on my sleeve when I was younger. And so it was hard to keep those in check and really balance, okay, what is it like to be really interested in someone, but what do you do when that person hurts your feelings or steps on your toes a little bit or makes you angry? And trying to balance all that and make sure that you have that spiritual foundation. It can be definitely challenging.
Yeah, I think, I was I was 15 when we first started talking, and I wasn't ready to date. But I was an only child, and I still am. And I didn't really. My mom, through a season of the next few years, I don't remember. It's all a blur, honestly.
Yeah.
But we were such good friends before we started dating. So our spiritual foundation was there. We would go out, as dumb as this may sound in our culture, we would go out on Tuesday nights to go visit people who hadn't been to church in a while, because we were so involved in our local youth ministry. Yeah. And we would go hang out at McDonald's afterwards and eat, like 6 or 8 of us. So we have the spiritual, then we have the social, and we weren't even dating at the time.
Right.
And so we're in those, and then just friendships started to develop. And I would say this, she was my best friend. We were best friends long before we started dating. Yeah. And not in a weird way. It was just like, we just kind of got each other. And I think that's the beauty of the fact that when I teach these series, like, that is one thing in our life I feel like we did do right. And there's some things that kind of, stupid things about being immature and all that thing. We had to grow up a little bit. But as far as like not just, it wasn't all physical and it wasn't all emotional. Like we genuinely cared about each other as a person. So the interpersonal side of that, we were building long before the emotions came. And even in the best situations, especially when you're young, or especially when you're not whole, or if you have some issue from the past, a father issue, you have an issue of abuse or unforgiveness, or your parents were divorced and you haven't found wholeness for that. I didn't have much of that. What I did have is my mom went through cancer when I was 16 or 17, which was a very unique season. And her family was there for me. And that was a little bit of a blur, so I'm not real sure all that happened in that season. But if we had not had the spiritual foundation, the social setting, the people around us caring for us, known each other deeply, that would have been a highly emotional time for both of us, especially for me. And so I think, in a weird way, we did it right, but we did it way too early, I would say. I think it's still way too early at 15, 16, 17, 18 years old. When you're graduating high school, you got a lot going on. Maybe that's a better season to start thinking about it. I just think dating is dangerous because it's dangerous, especially when you don't have those foundations in order. Because for 6 years, I mean, we'd be fools to sit here and tell you that we didn't struggle physically. That the enemy wasn't trying to do things to push his way in, and with God's grace and God's help, we were able to fight against those things. But it was surely a temptation. Right. And so when you're 15 and you don't have things in order, you better imagine. You can only imagine how much that's out of control. And so I would say we did things for the most part in order. And then in high school or in college, there was a season we went through where I was still dealing with some stuff that I hadn't dealt with. I mean, I had the spiritual foundation, but I think I lacked some authenticity. And I think that's one of the reasons now we are healthy and our church is healthy, and people kind of look at our relationship and go, man, y'all are so real and whatever. I mean, whether that's true or not, people say that. And so for me, I had to kind of be authentic and real in college, which led to a breakup. And I had to deal with some issues in my life that maybe I didn't deal with at 15, 16, 17 years old. And so we split for a little season. And then through a series of kind of dealing with some things, came back together. And it was, I think, better from that point on, being real, being authentic. So
I think that's important for people to hear too, because I think people may look at you guys and see like where you are now, just like we do anyone on social media, whatever, like, oh, look what they have, look where they are. And they haven't seen you and your marriage over the last 20 years and your dating life over the last 6 years. They didn't know that your mom had cancer and that you walked with his family through that. They don't know about the breakup. They don't know about what your family endures in ministry, so many things that your marriage has been put through, and you've come out on the other end. And it's been really cool to watch. And our singles on our staff talk about this all the time too. Like what you guys have, the way that you persevere has been really cool to watch, and you're very authentic, and I can vouch for that. It's not just something that people say, we see it.
And I think with authenticity too, and Julie, you can speak to this and we'll talk about this in the series a little bit more about mitigated language. Authenticity requires you to not mitigate the way you talk to each other.
Right.
And it doesn't mean it has to be rude or obnoxious. It just means that, so authenticity at 21 versus 30 was a lot different. I was a lot more authentic at 30. I'm a lot more authentic with her today. In the last 5 years, a lot more authentic and a lot more real and a lot more accepting, and realizing that I've done some stupid things since we were dating, since we're married. She's done some stupid things since not many, but a few, since we were dating, since we were married. But the reality is we're more grace-filled now than we've ever been because we understand the spiritual foundation and the depths of that. And we've walked through a lot more together. Right. And so authenticity, while you thought you were authentic at 21, you're a lot more authentic at 35 if you fight through some stuff. So
absolutely. So I'm hearing what you're saying, and you're saying spiritual needs to come first and foremost, right? That's what you've said. For you guys, because that's what you started with and you've maintained that, it's like, duh. What about for the single who's new to their faith, or what about the married couple that's been married for 15 years and they weren't following Christ, but now they've decided to follow Christ? What is the first step for them to make the spiritual portion of their love cake first?
Yeah. You want to talk to me, Jill?
You can talk.
So, yeah, because I have all these notes and Evernote documents about what I want to talk about in the series. And I'm sure we won't get through everything. But one of the things I would say to anyone who's married or if you're single and you're trying to figure out this whole thing is I think sometimes you got to go back and unlearn some things.
Yeah.
Culture teaches so many things. You got to forget everything you know about relationships.
Which is hard.
Because 80% of it's wrong. If you grew up in this culture and you watch social media and you watch, even if we talk about the 80s and the love song, that's the theme of this series. But it's different now. Now it's based on social media. It's based on what couples portray about their beautiful marriage, and look at all this. And, how much, it's amazing how many photos we put on to make our life look better than it is.
Or you mentioned the other day about how like even TV shows, like all the girls want the guy who's treated them like crap.
Yeah, and so it's an infatuation season. So I mean, we referenced, as dumb as it sounds, it's a great example, The Bachelor or The Bachelorette.
Yeah.
All of that show is the 6-week to 18-month fantasy. It's all fantasy. Nothing in that. People say, "Oh, I'm so in love with 4 people." No, you're infatuated with 4 people.
Yeah.
And you're physically attracted to 4 people or 25 or whatever that is. Love is different. And we'll talk about this in that series, is that you got to see love from a different perspective. Love is not a feeling. It's not an emotion. I'm in love with this person. No, you're not. Love is a choice. And if I love you, I'm going to choose not to pursue those other things. If I love God and my relationship with God, I'm going to pursue not to. Yeah. That's a choice that I make. God chose to pursue us and chase us. So the first step in learning is unlearning. And I think we've got to quit pushing back on anything new. And when people say, well, you don't understand, well, then you're not ready to build your spiritual foundation. I'm not saying that I have all the answers or any spiritual leader has all the answers. I'm just simply saying when you think you have all the answers, or someone in a marriage that's failing, or in multiple relationships, or your marriage is you're 33, but you're living like you're 13. At the end of the day, at some point we got to realize we've been duped, and we got to say, okay, we're starting over. And I think that's part of the love cake illustration of pushing all this stuff aside and saying, forget about that. That's crap. That whole everything's out of order. You got to tolerate. You can't fix it all overnight. Let's figure out this whole thing first.
So you're saying figure it out, and I'm just trying to make this as practical as possible for these families. First step, what do they do? Yeah,
so if you're in a relationship and God's not the center of your life, you say, God's not the center of my life. I'm not following Jesus. He's not Lord of everything. I said it Sunday. If you're in a physically and emotionally charged relationship and you can't keep your hands up, break up.
Yeah.
Because you'll never get the spiritual thing right as long as you're distracted. That's a choice. I love God first. I'm choosing to love God by A, B, C, and D. Now, it's not a laundry list of religious behaviors. The problem is you're going to end up feeling the weight of your religion because you're going to try to do everything to fix it. And God says, no, let it go and trust me. Lean on me. Build your foundation on me. So the premise behind that whole thing is if you're not in a relationship and you're single, then quit looking. Focus on yourself and ask yourself really. And you know what? We can put some resources out there to ask certain questions throughout the podcast as well. But ask yourself, am I pursuing God first? Is he my one? What does my circle of influence, my social circle look like? And that'll tell you a lot about whether you're even prepared. And I think about you and I think about some of our other staff who are younger, who are single. I mean, you guys have the spiritual foundation right. You have the social setting right. But the interpersonal phase is real. Yeah. Just because somebody comes along, that there's don't skip to the attraction. Don't skip to the emotion. And I would say, we got a half a dozen or more now, young single staff. Some are getting married soon. There's a lot of that foundation that it is right, and it's taken years. Yeah. I mean, some of you guys are in your early 20s, mid 20s, late 20s. And you're like, you know what? I'm not going to rush this thing. And I think that's a slowdown. If you're married, it comes back to, I would say, if you're in a situation, then take a preparing a rich, assessment, get to the heart of the problems, and then figure out how you can get some help with building your life on that foundation. Problem is, we like to go straight to the interpersonal phase and say, skip the spiritual, skip the social. Let's get to the let's just go talk for 4 hours. How many times have we talked for hours and then nothing changed, or it changed for 2 weeks because we didn't get down to the spiritual issue? And we'll talk about that this Sunday a little bit about the world's formula versus God's formula, and how that repeat steps 1 through 3 that we talked about, what that means if you take God's formula versus the world's formula.
I'm excited to hear
I also think if you're married, one of the things you can do is you can seek out maybe a couple that's been married for 40 or 50 years because they've been through some stuff together. And that's where the love comes in. There is this infatuation stage when you're new and you're dating, and that's unsustainable. But sit down with someone who's wise, who has that spiritual foundation, and can walk you through that. Carl and I grew up in a culture where not much was talked about openly. And so if there were issues when we were dating or when we were married, we were really not, it was just not an open dialogue and an open conversation that people were having. You didn't talk about what you were struggling with. And so I think growing up in that culture, you take that into marriage and you're like, well, we're probably the only people having these problems. And that's
or you're embarrassed by it.
Yeah, and you're like, well, we should have had this figured out. We dated for so long. Yeah. But marriage brings a new set of problems, a new set of challenges, new issues, and I just think we have to be better as a culture, and especially in our church world, being open to talking about the things in marriage that cause so many issues. Because I can guarantee you, you're not the only couple struggling with it. In fact, you're probably part of the majority of people who are struggling with some type of issue. And the issues seem to last, years at times if you don't seek out the right help. And so I think seeking out people who have been through some stuff, who have weathered the storm when it comes to marriage. And that's one of the things Carl and I are really passionate about, is like when we see new people get married, I've told many of the young staff, hey, when you struggle, not if you struggle, but when you struggle in marriage, I need you to come sit on my couch and grab a blanket and let's sit down and just chat for a couple hours. And let's get this out in the open because we had some hard years early on in our marriage. And had we had those people in our lives that we could have just barged through their door and plopped on their couch, it would have saved us a bunch of trouble and a bunch of heartache. And so we are always open to do that for anybody because I think it's so important.
And so I think too, to piggyback on what you're saying there, I think one of the things is you have to give somebody, and it has to be the right somebody, permission to be brutally honest with you and to say, you got a bad attitude and you're manipulative. And, and so I think at the end of the day, she's told me before, and we don't have an issue saying this, I'm a strong personality, a type 8 on the Enneagram, a high D, a high I on the disc analysis. I get it. Like my personality is a lot. And it's not because I'm in certain situations even more. And in her background, she grew up very shy. She was very quiet. She's not very boisterous. She's grown into a phenomenal leader. But I think that was not her initial she was just kind of a follower for a long time. And now God's using her in incredible ways. But part of that, she would say it's hard to be married to you. Well, and that's hard to hear. And so, then,
that's bold.
Yeah. But it took me to say, okay, why?
Yeah.
But that's non-mitigated language. Okay, why is it hard to be married to me? And then it turns into, well, I feel like, and it's okay, feelings aren't always right or wrong. So how do we navigate this?
I'm sure you hate that.
I
never
hate
said
that statement.
No. But like the reality is like sometimes men say, well, you're not physical. I don't feel like you love me. Well, it's not. Feelings aren't right or wrong. Or you talk this way and it makes me feel, we got to navigate what's truth and what's feelings, and too much because we're still 13 living on we built our relationship on feelings. So now we live on feelings. And I think we really dug into that. And now, like, rather than like 3 days of like mood swings or 3 days of my attitude of being, moody or whatever it may be.
Mood swings.
So it's not me that has mood swings, but I can have an attitude.
It's neither, I guess.
No, and so the reality
Somebody
is,
else.
It used to be 3 or 4 days and be like, okay, what's wrong? Now it's 30 minutes. Like, all right, sit down.
Yeah.
We're shooting straight. We can't.
I love that.
We can't be this way. And then by the end of the night, it's fine. It used to be a week. And then it was.
I don't think it was a week.
Well, no,
That's
it was 3 days to get to the point. Then it was 3 days healing from the discussion afterwards.
Yeah.
Because what happened is after you wait so long, well, then when you said and then you said, and when you do this, it makes me feel this way. Like, well, why didn't we talk about this?
Yeah.
So now we just talk about it, and we understand like God's forgiven us much. We can now forgive each other much. And so I literally said to her one day, I said, like, I'm a grace-filled person. I may not come off that way, but I'm very grace-filled, and that was a game changer for our relationship because I can come off as very domineering and very boisterous and like, well, you're always trying to correct me or you're always trying to, preach at me. And I said, no, I'm not. I'm very grace-filled, but it doesn't always come off that way. And so those non-mitigated conversations have helped us tremendously and in so many ways. I
think communication is something too that is so just jacked up in our culture to where I'm 22, everyone's texting, nobody is talking face to face. Nobody wants to say the hard stuff face to face. So I would even say to single people, as you guys have been this to me, but get around a couple that you've seen their marriage, you see what they're doing, and you see the way they live for God, and you see results of what they've invested in their passion and their heart and all of that. Like, get behind them and ask them questions, because you said get brutally honest, but single people, you have to put yourself in places too. Like, you can't just expect somebody just to start speaking into your life. Like, invite people to. You might get around people like Carl who will be like, I'm going to be brutally honest whether or not you like it, but invite people to be in your life.
And part of that process too is, if you're single and you're looking for that, you've got to find that before you get in a relationship. Yeah. And you've got to let them know you as a person so they can see the change happens when you're in a relationship. So you can't go and be like, okay, we're in this relationship, help us. Like, I don't even know who you are.
Yeah, that's
true.
So
I don't know how you've changed. I don't know what this person has, what kind of effect they've had on you. But when you've known someone for 2 years and you've let them pour into your life, and then something happens, you're like, hey, something's not happening.
And listen when they say something's changed.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, but the problem is usually that happens in the first 6 weeks to 18 months, and people get mad. More often than not, this is why I don't do marriage counseling and I don't do premarital counseling, because I tick people off entirely too much, and they leave our church, and then they end up doing, and then they end up, I would just go down a list of people that I'm like, are you in church? Are you serving God? No, because the spiritual foundation was broke. And so I just finally quit doing it, because I'm like, you know what? you can't handle what I'm going to say because it hurts. And so let's send them to a counselor. If they'll go navigate that relationship, let me try to come alongside, because I didn't know them enough before I tried to speak into their life.
Right.
They came wanting, hey, help us. But like, do you really want that? And so I think the relationship has to be developed even before you start dating, if you really want that as a single person.
For sure. Well, I'm so excited for the rest of this series as a single person, and I'm sure I kind of have a little bit of knowledge of what's to come, so that makes me even more excited with the love cake. But I've heard through the grapevine that the title of your message this Sunday is called Slow Jams.
Yeah, so Julie's going to be singing. No, totally kidding.
No, I'm actually going to be out of town, and I'm kind of grateful for that.
You're grateful. You're going to leave us.
All I can say is come. We're going to have a little fun, have a little DJ on stage, and have a little, I think it's important to break down the walls with laughter and humor.
Yeah, for sure.
And so if you're an 80s kid, if you'd like 80s music, come be a part, and
if you're not an
get your
80s
vocal
kid,
cords warmed up, because we'll have a little fun.
I was born in 97. So
and she told me, she said, I'm glad I'm out of town, but I'm scared that I'm out of town, because anything could come out at any minute.
Yes.
So.
Well, thank you guys so much for joining us this week, and we're pumped to talk to you about the message Slow Jams next week.
Yep, we're excited. Thank you guys, Ash.
Thanks.
Thanks so much for joining us and tuning in. Be sure to subscribe, like, share on all platforms. Those will be listed above, and we will see you next week.